This is Marlon Weems. I am the publisher of the Journeyman newsletter, and I am with Antonio Milian, who I know him as the 10-minute history guy. And so we're going to talk a little history. You know, it's one of those things where it seems like every day we're making new history. So this should be an interesting conversation. And we're going to jump right in. One of the things that I thought we could talk about, Antonio, is the just what's going on with the Alien Enemies Act, I guess, which is what the Trump administration is using as their reasoning behind or their rationale behind, uh, just summarily disappearing folks out of the country and throwing them in prisons. And
Right.
so I noticed yesterday, I guess the Supreme Court maybe there's some caveats in there. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but the upshot to me seems like they're just saying, okay, go ahead. And so I saw that you had done a little bit of work in terms of the history behind that act. And I thought maybe that'd be a good place to start. So why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Alien Sedition Act is also called the Alien Enemies Act. It was, just like what Trump is suggesting, it's supposed to strengthen national security, quote unquote, right? Um, I believe that it was started when it originally started. It was in like 1790 something. It was started by the Federalist Party. The party's not even around anymore, right? And it was the Federalist Party. They had taken over control, similar to the Republican Party. They had taken over control of the House, the Senate, and things like that. And so they were just pushing laws through left and right, left and right. And this was one of them. This is the big one. It was because of they had like this really weird quasi war against France.
Now,
And
wait, America did?
yeah, it was. It
What was it,
wasn't
like a
like
Cold War or what?
it
Because I
wasn't like
thought
a
France back then was supposed to be on our side.
Yeah, it wasn't an official war. It was like
Okay.
a quasi. It was like a quasi war. It was really complicated, but um, they said it was meant to strengthen national security. The interesting thing about it is when I read about it is that it stifled free speech. That was one of the big things. It stifled free speech, and it went after there was two parties: the Federalist Party and then the Democratic Republican Party. It was one. The Democrats, Republicans essentially were like one party, and then there's the Federalist Party, and it went after the newspapers of the Democratic Republicans. The only people that were affected by this Alien Sedition Act were newspaper publishers.
Hmm.
Um, and essentially, how did you get information back then? You got it either word of mouth or through the newspaper, right? So it ended up being like this huge thing. Now, when the when the Federalists were no longer in power, they essentially got rid of the law. The law is still around on the books. Obviously, presidents can still use it, but it was no longer implemented. It was no longer pushed, and the Federalist Party is no more. And a lot of people say it's because of the Alien and Sedition Act or the Alien Enemies Act that that party is actually no longer in existence in this country. Um, and yeah, I think that the president is going down a really. I think he wants to be a dictator so bad. He really does. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, he's
He,
telling us that.
yeah, I mean, he really
I
does.
believe him. I mean, he's doing he's checking all the
And,
boxes.
right, right. And I think that I grew up in New York, grew up in Brooklyn, and I think he views the Western Hemisphere as like a mob boss. Like this is his turf. Um, I think that everybody in his mind, everybody has their turf. Like Russia has Europe, the United States has North and South America, China has all of Asia. Right? Everybody has their turf, and so when you see him going after like Panama, he's like, "Yo, this is ours. This Panama Canal is ours." We see him going after Greenland. This is ours. When you see him go after Canada, this is ours. Mexico. He feels like in his mind because he's the big guy on the block. He has the most weapons. He has the most everything. He feels like this everything in the Western Hemisphere, like from Canada down to Argentina. He feels like it's his. And you see
Hmm.
him palling around with the president of Argentina. You see him palling around with all these different authoritarian. What's this guy's name in Canada? He's like a conservative, Poulet.
Yeah,
He's like
right,
the
right.
Trump. He's like the Trump of Canada, but even he's tame compared to Trump.
Oh
But
yeah.
you see him. He's making friends with this guy. You know what I mean? Um, it's just one of those things where I tell people because I went to the hands off rally in Charlotte.
Okay.
I went to this hands off rally in Charlotte, and I have friends that are just like, the election's over. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to go protest anymore. This is an immigration issue. Blah 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 blah. And I said, how long do you think it's going to be before they're done with the immigrants and they come after you? They come after me. There's nothing stopping this president from being like, you know what? There's very few things, excuse me, not nothing. There's very few things stopping this president from being like, you know what? We're going to send prisoners to El Salvador. You know how much it costs to house prisoners here in America? You got to feed them. You got to give them medical care. You got to do this. You got to do that. We just send them to El Salvador. It's cheaper. And he's all about saving a dollar. This is whole Doge thing. So how long before he's like, oh, we could cut the federal prison system in half by just sending everybody with, regardless of the amount of
Mm-hmm.
kind of crime, just send them to El
Just
Salvador.
offload outsourcing.
Outsource them to El Salvador. And America's big on outsourcing. I go to the mall and every security guard there is working for a different company. So America is big on outsourcing.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, it's I certainly can see your point. Now, what about tariffs though? I mean, because it's ironic to me in the sense, and you talk about just the historical background. I
Mhm.
mean, isn't that what the Boston Tea Party was about?
It was about tariffs, yeah.
It was
Well,
about
essentially, it's
tariffs,
about
right?
taxation, right?
Yeah,
And the conservative, their big thing is like, from what is this? What did he say the other day? Trump from 18 something to 19 something, we funded America through tariffs, right? But look at how much America has changed. In
hmm
the late 1800s, we didn't even have the majority of houses didn't have indoor plumbing. The
we didn't
majority
have
of
income
houses.
tax.
Right. We didn't have income tax. We didn't, I mean, America has changed so much. To say we can fund everything in this country through tariffs is insane. We live in a country that is more than just growing your own food in front of your house or behind your house. We live in a very connected world. And I think, Trump is from my dad's era. They're both around the same age. They both grew up in New York City. They both grew up in a different time.
Sure.
And I think that generation has this concept of the world that's very oversimplified on how
hmm
things work. I could guarantee you if I sit Trump in front of a computer and ask him to send an email, he'll struggle. Oh,
He may
absolutely.
he may not know how how to
He might
even
not
boot
know
it up, man.
how. And I'm saying that because, I have a parent, I have an uncle, I have a dad his age. Ask my dad to send an email. He's putting a virus on his computer.
hmm Yeah, I mean, you can tell that I mean, he's been on this tariff thing though, going way back. So it's one of those. I heard a couple of things. I've just been listening at what folks are saying. Certainly economists, but I like to hear, of course, the guys that are in my world in terms of finance. What are these guys saying? And I don't agree with him all the time. Um, Lawrence Summers, and
Okay.
he's been an advisor to I think he was an advisor to Joe Biden. He was Treasury Secretary at one time. I guess he's at Harvard now, and he said he made some really interesting comments. I guess this morning about this tariff situation, and the word he used was like something like extemporaneous, like this is just some off the cuff, like something
Mhm.
they're doing. It's not a plan, it's not a
No,
strategy. It's
no.
just I like tariffs and let's do something,
Right. Let's get it done.
and so
Let's just do
his
just do something. Weekend. It's
but he
like,
said he
what do
he
you want to?
said
Where you want to go to eat? Like
yeah, yeah, and it's
McDonald's.
like you just start naming off restaurants until
Right,
something
right,
hits,
right,
right?
right.
And he said extemporaneous. That was the word
Hmm.
he used. And so he said, this is not an economic policy; it's an ideology. And that
I,
I
I
was just, you know,
yeah,
and he
I
said
agree.
it's not like grounded in any kind of critical math, or they got this equation that they've thrown out there, and it looks good because it's all Greek letters and
Hmm.
stuff, and you can't figure out what it really says unless you
Right.
know that kind of thing. But yeah, this doesn't have. Summers said something like, this is to economics as creationism is to history.
That, yeah, yeah.
And I was
It's
like,
it's
"Woo,
there.
he
It's
really went
there.
deep now."
It's
But
yeah. It's there. It gives you hope, but it's bullshit at the end of the day.
you can't prove it works exactly.
Right.
You gotta be doing it on faith, right?
Right. Right.
So
100%. Honestly, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's a lot more nefarious reasons why they're doing this, especially when you look at the tanking of the economy. And,
mhm.
50, you're a finance guy. 58% of Americans, myself included, have money in 401ks. 401ks are mostly based in mutual funds and, whatever. Um, the tanking of the economy, I think, is like to damage people's 401ks. So there's no exit plan. I think this is
Well, it's a
part of
transfer of wealth for sure.
right.
You
Well,
know,
not only the transfer of wealth, it's to
well,
get
it
you where
cripples you
you.
too.
Well, yeah, you
You're
can't
not
go
going to jump
anywhere.
up and go to Italy because you can't.
Exactly, exactly. So when I see the stuff that they're doing with immigration, where they're telling people, even if you're an American citizen, be careful what you put on your phone. When I see stuff like that, and then I see he's tanking the economy, it's part of, and especially since he's doing it so fast. We're 2 months, we're not even a year into it. We're 2 months, 2.5 months into this thing, right? And he's tanking the economy. He's having this weird immigration strategy where they're checking people's phones at the entry. Whether you're an American citizen or not, they're downloading your data off phones to see what you did in other countries. So this is part of in my personal opinion, this is part of a more nefarious thing to keep people where they are. Listen, I don't want to, somebody sees what's happening at the border where they're checking people's phone. Maybe now is not a good time to go on vacation overseas, right? I'll go, I live in the South. I'll go to the mountains, whatever. And on top of that, I don't have a lot of money. So maybe I can't go anywhere at all. So I'm stuck here. So when somebody is stuck in a specific place, they're open to whatever the president wants to do. So I think this is part of an overall goal of having a social policy that's going to start to like throw people in prison. So right now he's testing it out with the immigrants, seeing what the courts do, things like that, while he's tanking the economy and he's putting these weird things in place at the border. And then what's going to come next, in my personal opinion, is going to be them starting to lock American citizens up for whatever reason. And that's just the conspiracy theorist in me. Take it with a grain of
I
salt.
don't
I
know that
see it.
I don't agree that it's really that much of a conspiracy because it's really the authoritarian playbook, right? You look at Turkey, for example. Now, different scenario, but Erdogan basically, a few years back, I don't know, he was on vacation, he was out of the country. Somebody tried, folks tried a coup, and that was his excuse. He came back in. Next thing you know, journalists,
Right.
judges, just
Right.
down the line. Well, look at Trump.
Mhm.
He's trying
Yeah.
to basically say, he's trying to cause us to lose faith in the system that as we understand it. Now,
Hmm.
it's not as though judges have always been great for people of color, but there is a system that you can kind of expect it's going to behave a certain way. All this
Right.
is out the window. You look at what the Supreme Court's done in the last 24 hours, and you're just going, hang on a second, you what you know
Yeah.
so um I don't know if it's that big of a conspiracy because it's happening
It's happening. Like somebody said in the comments, they're trying to prevent an exodus from the United States. There was an article in the Atlantic where they said that Americans were buying their exit plan. They're trying to get out of
Oh
here.
yeah, no, it's listen. I can tell you, and just in my circle of people I know, folks are at least coming up with a plan B.
Hmm.
And it's so something that's so strange to me, and I guess it's because of how he went at Canada. And I started thinking about. I haven't read the books, but I have watched The Handmaid's Tale. And
Hmm.
Canada was the spot where everybody's like, let's get the hell up out of here.
Yeah,
We're
let's
going to
get the hell
Canada.
up out of
And
here.
it's like he's really trying to, just, I just wonder why in the world did he focus on, look, Canada don't mess with
Canada.
nobody.
Yeah, but the thing is, Canada is so much like the United States. We would, if we went to
We
Canada, we
wouldn't
wouldn't
miss a
even know the
beat.
difference.
We wouldn't
Yeah.
miss a beat. And we might learn another language or two.
There you go. There
you
you
know,
go.
we might actually be exposed to some culture. I tell my kids, I've got four, two of which are grown men. But I have a daughter that finishes college in just a few weeks, and a son that's that's a freshman in college. And I tell them, my biggest regret, and it's crazy given where I used to work and being in New York. But my biggest regret is that I didn't spend more time outside of America, because I think, I came up in the era where, dude, if you went 2 or 3 states over, you've been on a trip. Yeah. If
Yeah.
I lived in Arkansas growing up. So if you went like to, you know, Tennessee, you've done something, right? That's like
Right.
going out of the country. Well, I am really trying to get them to have a different point of view, a more global, I guess. But
Hmm.
but I think that's part of the big problem that we have just as a citizenry, is that we're so insular that we don't really we buy the lie or the myth
Hmm.
of American exceptionalism, that this is the best we can get, and it's
Right.
just it's just not. It's
It's not
not.
true. That's something that I would love to do as well. I have a son, and as he gets older, I want to encourage him to travel more because I see the way, like I have friends of mine who, a friend of mine needed medical care, and she just goes to Mexico and gets it done. She's like, yeah. I was like, well, don't you feel safe? What about the language barrier? She's like, the doctor's American. The doctor studied. This doctor studied at University of California. He practices in Mexico, and I'm just like, what is going on here? Like this, arguing with my insurance company. I'm over here arguing with my insurance company, and my friend is getting procedures pennies on the dollar in Mexico, and
Man,
and I'm thinking to myself, life, it does not have to be this
it
hard.
doesn't
It's
have
this
to be that
country.
hard.
Yeah, this
There is
country
a
makes it that.
there's a and I can't recall her name right off the top of my head, but there's a woman that I enjoy reading, and she um, seems like she used to be a reporter, maybe for CNN, or one of the big traditional media outlets. And if I remember it correctly, and I read this story of hers, it was probably a year ago, where she I guess her husband, whatever his job was, they had to leave the country for a minute, and I don't know. I think maybe Italy. It could have been Sweden, wherever it was. And she got outside of America, and it's sort of like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I don't have to eat lunch at my desk? I can actually get up and like go chill for an hour or so,
For
and
two
nobody's gonna like
hours.
come looking for me.
Right. I
I
have a
don't have to
relative.
like just work myself to the bone. And see, so when I got in the securities business, it was in the 80s, the early
Mhm.
80s. And that is sort of that moment, the yuppie moment, and when just we sort of became our work. That was our
Right.
identity. And, it got to be like a badge of honor to work 60 hours a week, and,
Right.
and be there at 7 o'clock in the morning and leave at 7 o'clock in the evening. And I think part of the problem, and this is one of the interesting sort of, I don't know, I guess a positive of COVID, was that people had the light switch turn on that, wait a minute, you mean I could have been doing all this crap at home?
At home, right? Or,
You mean to tell me I didn't have to?
another thing is with in my case, I was working for a tech company, and my coworker started dying, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm I'm spending all this time at home. I got a kid at home. I got a family. Life is too short. I had a coworker like we said, COVID. I had a coworker. She had a cough. She's like, I'm just gonna leave for the day. She went home, went to sleep, and never woke up again.
Wow.
Never woke up again. And it's one of those things where I can do all this at home, and I can kind of relax because I don't have a supervisor breathing down my throat. You know, yeah,
Just
this
as
is great.
productive.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
just as productive.
and that's one of the things I've been looking a lot lately at, just wealth inequality, and just some of the numbers. And over the last 40 years, productivity has gone through the roof, but wages, productivity's done this, wages have stayed flat.
Stayed stagnant,
and
right?
and so um, I think people are starting to realize all of this, and that's why I think, back to your earlier point, that's why dudes moving with such speed, because it's
Hmm.
like they're trying to get a whole lot of stuff done that they know isn't popular, by the way,
Right, right.
and they're trying to make it happen before anybody knows what's up. You know,
Yeah, they're moving at like you said, they're moving at like lightning speed.
yeah,
Every day
it's
it's
catch me if you
something
can
new.
kind of stuff. I mean,
Right.
it's like, okay, courts, do what you want to, but we're gonna just deport the hell out of people, and
Right.
y'all
What
do what you need to do. But they know the courts are going to take months and weeks, and
yeah.
you know, so yeah,
What was what was the excuse they used with the man from Venezuela, the man that they sent to Venezuela? Oh, the plane's in the air over international waters. We don't have
yeah. I
jurisdiction
mean,
there.
that I don't think they're seeing how far they can push it until one of these judges says, "Okay, you know what? You're in contempt of court, and we're going to let you sit in a cell for a minute and think about it." And these
Right.
judges just they'll do it with the guy who stole some from Kmart, but that's the disappointment, and it reveals a lot about the system too.
Well, you do it to you do let's say the judge does it to one of Trump's surrogates where he's like, you're going to sit in jail. Trump sends out a tweet or on Truth Social and his thousands of his supporters at the jailhouse ready to kill somebody, ready to hurt somebody. You know what I mean? He's gonna act like, I didn't do that, blah 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 blah. But we know the intent behind it, you know. So I would not be surprised if some of these judges are scared. They're like, what, this guy is gonna try to ruin my life, try to hurt me, try to hurt my family, So let's take it easy. And he's the president of the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah, one thing about this whole era is, and it's sad, but I think necessary, is how it has really unmasked what America's all about. And I mean, you just think about it. I grew up, man, where, America we were in every other country's face telling them how they needed to behave
Hmm.
as a country. And now, who can we really go and tell anything to
Right? Nope.
anymore?
Nobody.
You know,
Nobody.
so yeah, it's what a time to be alive, as they say, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because you really I don't think Americans want to admit how racist they are or they can't have the potential of being. So what I noticed, especially when Kamala Harris was running, is that people would find these nitpicky issues. I don't like the sound of her voice. I don't like her laugh. But it's really deeper than that. I'm like, what about her laugh don't you like? Oh, it's just too. People would say, "Oh, it's ghetto." How? How is a laugh ghetto? What's the real intent? And I see that more and more now. And now that Trump has won, I see people. They're like, some people are like waking up. Like, wait a minute, this guy's doing what? So I'm thinking to myself, why did you vote for him? Because you were racist towards her? because that's not a good reason to vote for somebody.
Well,
Um, and now you're waking up
I'm
to we're all
actually
getting screwed over.
I'm working on an article. I haven't had I write about politics, the economy. There's a lot of people think about Wall Street and they don't really think about how it's sort of like the nexus of politics, the economy, even race, if you really think about it. And so I just feel like all those things overlap. And so with what's going on right now, it's just difficult for me to um, focus on anything else but just kind of what's going on in the markets, all the policy stuff. But just over on the side, I've been working on this piece, and it's really a lot. And I talk about a specific relationship. I don't out the guy, but it is I live in a place where Republicans outnumber Democrats probably 6 to 1. And so you have to interact with these people unless you just don't want to be around anybody. And for the most part, politics never comes up
Right.
for the most part, but every now and then, especially because of my, I'm an unusual black person for most of the white
Hmm.
folks that I run into because they can't figure me out. It's like, wait a minute, you used to work on Wall Street and now you, you got this this Substack. What how does all that fit
Yeah.
together?
How does that work?
Yeah, and so this guy and I kind of got to be, I wouldn't say friends, but this is a cat that would come down. This is his summer home, or off season. They would rent their place
Hmm.
out in the summer, and like in the early fall, they come and hang out for a month or so. So I would
Right.
have breakfast with this guy, and 99% of the time it's cool, but I could always tell he was just trying to sort me out, like,
Right.
okay, Wall Street, but he's black. So is he a Republican? What's going
Oh
on?
God.
I think he's probably a Democrat because all the black people are Democrats, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And so he would just kind of flip out a little comment here and there. And I think, um, and most of it's pretty innocuous stuff. What do you think about this, that, or the other? But this is about a year and a half ago. So Biden was still the one that was running. And we were having breakfast, and he made somehow Kamala Harris came up. I must have mentioned her. His immediate response to me was, "She's an empty suit,
Wow.
dude." And that's when my black came out because I said to him, I said, "Hang on a second. What do you mean an empty suit? She's the vice president." So yeah, it was basic. She didn't know anything. I said, so she didn't have any policies. I said, really? So what were Mike Pence's policies? He he looked at me like that. He's like, well, I said, you know what? If Kamala Harris was Carl Harris and Carl was white and he had been the attorney general of the fifth largest economy in the world, a senator, and a vice president, would you really
Yeah.
say he was an empty suit?
Nope.
And the
Not at
guy
all.
just sat back and he was like, well, I guess you got a point. But that was the moment that I knew we were done
Right.
because it told me there was something back there in the back that was going on that for whatever, he was fronting with me because I was a good black,
Hmm.
he had some stuff going on that was just racist.
Yeah.
And
Big
so
time.
anyway, I somebody's oh yeah, DA, AG, senator, and VP, empty suit.
Hmm.
Yes,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, I
Yep.
left
Yep.
out the DA. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's incredible
And she
how
might be the governor of California next. So
well you never know. But I got I got thoughts on that current governor, but I digress.
he's
Um,
really, he's
but,
very interesting. Well, I got to ask you as a finance guy, how
yeah.
do you feel about the tariffs and the way the markets are going? And of course, not giving financial advice, but
Oh no, no. I mean, it's I've told people it's they're trying to pay for the tax cuts.
Mhm.
Period. Full stop. They're trying to pay because they know the exposure is this: the Tax Cut and Jobs Act alone adds almost $5 trillion to the deficit. Then you got, they're talking about part of this deal, and this is supposed to be the sweetener is no tax on tips, which, by the way, if you're making your living on tips, are you really paying taxes?
Exactly.
No. And
Exactly.
and
You're getting
and
cold hard cash in your hand. You mean to tell me you're
yeah,
putting
you ain't paying no
25%,
taxes.
35% aside?
Okay.
Please.
So also they're talking about no taxes on overtime, but over here on the side, they're trying to get rid of overtime.
Project
Okay.
2025.
Yeah.
Project 2025. They have,
Yes.
I believe it's page 600 or something, where they say they want you to be able to negotiate how overtime is calculated with your boss.
Right. Right. So it's again, and then the other thing is on American cars, they're going to make the interest deductible, which it used to be before Reagan. Reagan came in, and I want to say it was maybe 1986. There was the Tax Reform Act of '86 or something like that. And one of the things that happened was they made it where used to be your interest on your car loan, you could write it off if you
Real, I
itemize.
didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, man. I mean, I'm old. What can I say?
You're good.
but no, seriously, it that's something else that they're throwing. So each one of these things that I mentioned, all of them add to the deficit. Each individual thing. So the sum total of all of those things, when you look at how much it adds to the deficit, and then the interest cost of financing it,
Mhm.
dude, you're getting up to like $9 trillion.
Jeez.
nine
Yeah,
trillion
that's a lot of
dollars.
money.
I mean, folks that don't, if you don't subscribe, you should check out the last thing I wrote. I got because I always bring receipts. So, so yeah, and it's not a secret because even though Trump is saying on his social media that it's about fentanyl and it's about people cheating us and it's all this stuff, if you listen to the Treasury Secretary, all he's saying is, he kind of, yeah, these unfair, trade, blah, 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 blah. But all he's talking about is how the tariffs are going to generate income. They're going to generate income. They're estimating that these tariffs are going to generate something like $200 billion a year. Well, who's
Damn.
paying? Who's paying the tariffs?
Yeah,
Us.
we are. Yeah, we are.
So I mean, think about how cynical that is, man. There's a tax cut that most of us won't feel anything from, and yet they're basically paying for it by raising the cost of everything we buy,
Yep.
from tennis shoes to cars to eggs. You can't even turn around without
Yeah.
chipping in for that
And
tax cut.
what one thing that I hear a lot of people on that side say is, well, we just got to go through some growing pains and then we'll be, my thing is like when Obama came in during the housing crisis in 2008, if we would have just said, "Oh, we just have to go through some growing pains until things get better," nobody was buying that. Why are people buying it from this guy? It's not. This is not a short term thing. This is a long
Well, they
term
keep saying
thing.
they're trying to position it like it's a one-time charge, kind of.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's look if here's also I think the some of these billionaires that supported him they thought they knew what he was going to do, but I think they are surprised because I cannot believe that Tim Cook, for example, thought he was going to get hit with what is it, a 43% tax on Vietnam? Because understand, last time Trump was president, a lot of these corporations moved their offshore operations in China to Vietnam
Hmm.
because of what Trump was doing with China. So now
Hmm.
he's just taxing everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't, I mean, so I don't think they really expected. Just before we got on, I saw that that Trump had hit China. I want to say it was a 105% tariff
Jesus.
because they missed the deadline on something, whatever.
It's
Yeah,
probably sell TikTok or
a
something. Yeah.
100. No, it's not. Oh, that's a different conversation, man.
Right.
Yeah, I got a theory on that one too. And I've talked about this before because um, Jeff Yass, the guy who's the wealthiest man in Pennsylvania, I know about him because he was a founder, and I guess he's still the chairman of Susquehanna International in Pennsylvania. So big, it's one of the biggest investment firms, in the world. Um, Through that firm, Yass bought an interest in ByteDance like 10 years ago when it was just a little startup.
Right.
And so they've been riding that always. And so that is why Trump totally flipped his position on TikTok because Jeff Yass started throwing money, not directly at him, but I think he and his wife donated somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 billion. So that is why suddenly Trump. Remember the whole thing about them having to sell. Trump is the guy who did that when he was
Hmm.
president in the first time.
Right.
Just like he's saying Canada is cheating us. Well, the deal that we have with China, I mean, with Canada and Mexico, is USMCA.
Right.
That is the deal he negotiated. So, what that tells the world is you can't negotiate with this guy because he will turn
He won't
around on
remember.
you.
He doesn't
Okay.
remember. I read something during his first administration where they would read the morning briefs to him, and he would say, "I don't want to hear that."
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't know what's going on. These bills and these agreements that he's putting his name on, he doesn't know what's going on with any of them. He doesn't read. I don't think he can read. Um, he doesn't read, and he's just a dumb person.
Yeah, he's not the sharpest knife in
He's
the
not a
drawer.
smart
So
person at
someone
all.
someone asked a question, and I thought about this, and the question is, do we think that the Trump regime, that's the terminology they use, which is getting closer and closer to being the reality. But do we think that they'll declare martial law? I don't put anything past these people,
No, I
but
don't
I
either.
don't think they see. I have thought, and this is you were talking about protests. I have thought, and I've told my kids, do not get out there because I think a lot of this stuff he would love for black folks to do, George Floyd style protests.
Right.
That would give the excuse, I think, to enact martial law. And maybe it sounds conspiratorial, I don't know, but before January 6th, that sounded conspiracy theory,
Mhm.
but until it happened. So, and we know that he has explored using, those kind of mechanisms. So that is why I'm kind of the mind to, let some other folks do some of the protesting and let's see what happens.
Right.
But I would not put it past him. I really wouldn't.
Right. I wouldn't put him past him either. I think he's 100% capable of martial law. I don't see it. I don't put it past him to do a fall flag event so that he could push
Mm.
martial law. Where something happens and no, like it pops off, and he orchestrated it. I just wouldn't put it past him to do any of that. Um, because we live in scary times, right?
Well, that's just it. And
The
I
thing
think
that saved us and
go ahead, you.
oh, the thing that saved us and got us Biden were COVID and then also the George Floyd protests.
Mm-hmm.
We were all home and we saw what happened with George Floyd, and it opened up a lot of people's eyes. And a lot of people were like, "Listen, I'm not voting for Trump." And then we had COVID and we saw how he responded to it,
Yep.
and over 1 million people died, and he told us to just stay positive. And meanwhile, everybody in his cabinet, everybody in his administration was like, this is a very deadly disease. And he did not tell America. He hid information. He said, oh, I don't want to start panic. When all actuality is he didn't want to come across weak.
Hmm.
So I feel like this time around, now that he's president, uh, he is going to be looking for any reason to come off as a strong man. And if that means deporting people, if that means sending people to El Salvador, if that means taking our rights away, if that means martial law, whatever makes him look good in the eyes of his people, that's what he's capable of.
Boy, it just occurred to me as I'm listening to this. We're, we're really probably depressing the hell out of some people, but
Listen, I mean,
we
it's
just
not
have to
it's
keep
not
it
meant to.
real. I mean, this is
It,
the world we're in.
this is real life, exactly. Like, I mean, life can be depressing. This is real life. We can't put anything past this guy because he's capable of anything. And again, by virtue of who he is, he's the most powerful man in the world right now, with the biggest military, with the most advanced military in the world. We can't put anything past him, legitimately.
I mean, he's literally talking about having a military parade on his birthday.
Yeah, yeah. He wants to have a military
I mean, he wanted to
parade.
do
He
that
did
when
that
he was
the first
president
time around.
before. Yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Right,
right. But
right.
see, the difference now is he's got all the sycophants around him that nobody says no. But if
Nope.
anything can get his attention or make him blink, I think it's Wall Street, because I'm hearing from guys that some of them voted for him, and I'm reading what, just a not sort of anonymous, not the big billionaires, but just the guys like me that get
Hmm.
interviewed, and folks are like, this guy's got to be stopped. This is crazy. This is, and when enough people start losing enough money, because by the way, this ain't over with the market. This is normal. What you have is, I mean, we basically had what, three consecutive down days. That's like 1987 Black Monday kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And so you typically will have a bounce back. We had a name for it, and it's we call it a dead cat bounce. Where the
Okay.
market just falls and falls, and then it bounces back up. But um,
But then it
you
goes
know,
back down again.
and then it goes back. So what people should realize is we're in, just technically, we're in bear market territory now, which that's when the market loses 20%, it falls 20% off its high. That
Hmm.
we've blown through that. So um I just don't think this is over by a long shot, especially given that he's ratcheting up on China. China's going to come back
Hmm.
with something. A couple of days ago, I mean, they're telling certain people, um, we're not shipping certain things to America.
Right.
And you've got companies that are saying, we're not buying goods from China unless you cover the tariff.
There.
Okay, so somebody's got to blink.
Yep.
So who
It's
knows?
gonna hit a fever. It's gonna hit a fever pitch when it starts affecting medical supplies, medication.
Mm-hmm.
Medication, medical supplies that are made overseas, and we can't get enough of them, or your hospital has a
Start having
shortage.
shortages.
It's gonna like that. Yeah, they're gonna start having shortages. I mean, it doesn't have to be big things. It could be, I don't know, gauze. It could be whatever. It could be a tool that's used, or if a hospital has to reuse tools for surgeries and stuff like that, and somebody gets an infection. Well, why did you get an infection? Well, we didn't have enough of the right tool. It's going to be a bigger issue
Mm-hmm.
than just like your everyday clothes. It's going to be things that people depend on. Um, and listen, I don't know. Hopefully, people show up at the ballot box in the next. Well, was it next year? Will we have the
Yeah, yeah.
Congress?
We
Yeah,
midterms.
yeah, midterms. So yeah, hopefully it's next year. People show up and we take back the Congress and the Senate. or and maybe in 4 years we take back the presidency. But it's what's happening now is just it can't
Man,
continue. And again,
I
remember,
hate to
we're
say it. I don't think we got 4 years. we,
no,
I
no,
mean, I'm hopeful that we've got to the midterms, but again, when you talk about the speed that he's doing these things, I don't even think the Project 2025 guys expected him to move this fast, right?
right.
But you know, when you talk about what gets people's attention, all of those things are certainly important. But people who follow me know I'm a I guess a cinephile is the word. Yeah, I just love movies.
Mhm,
I particularly like movies about finance and gangster
mhm.
movies. They're kind of the same in some ways,
Right, right, right.
but I just I'll use a from Trading Places. There are going to be a lot of folks who are not going to be able to buy the GI Joe with the Kung Fu grip. We
You
get
got it.
80% of our toys from China.
I know.
80%.
Yep.
And when do people start buying for Christmas? Starting in a
June.
month or two,
Yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah.
summer when stuff is cheap. Well, it ain't going to be
Hmm.
cheap. Hate to
No.
tell you, but you know,
I was reading something where, they said, well, Apple's just gonna have to make their phones in America. And I was
yeah,
reading
right. And
somebody,
who's going to do
somebody,
that?
somebody said, you know how much a iPhone would cost if it was made in America?
Yeah.
It would be $10,000.
No, it it won't be that expensive, but it'll be a $3,500 phone.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and not for nothing. This whole concept of bringing all these jobs here is it's a dream. We only we only have like 8% of the workforce is in manufacturing. We don't have the people.
we don't have the
That's why
people.
China
Yeah.
they got the people. And
Right.
I was looking at just doing a little bit of research, and although what people get paid in China is less, it's not that much less when you adjust it for inflation.
Right.
Their wages actually outpace inflation's. Ours barely do, if at all, and
Hmm.
they're closing the gap as that country becomes more and more, economically, powerful or whatever the word is.
Right.
I'm just saying that it used to be accurate to say, "Oh, those people don't make any money over there," but they are.
They do.
They are
Yeah.
making, and I'll post some of the numbers that I've seen. I ran across this today, and it was right up as I was getting up on this,
Hmm.
our event, and I didn't get a chance to dig into it, but I think it's probably pretty accurate. And the other thing is, China is number one in almost every aspect of manufacturing,
Yep.
and we're not
Yep.
even their biggest customer.
Right. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, China has been around for like 10,000 years. They know how to survive. It's not a
Exactly.
matter of like, there's nothing America can do to them, even with the market and things like that, that they're not going to bounce back from. They have 10,000 years, 10,000 years of history. They, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it's sad to say, but hopefully, look, America has been through a lot worse too. So I'm hopeful, but it's one of those things. I forget what culture it comes from, but it's like watch and pray.
right.
you know,
Listen, that's all we can
that's
do
all you
because
can do, man. That's all you can
we
do.
can't. I mean, like the vote. I mean, by the time the vote was in November, so we got to wait another year and change before we can do that again. Our Congress people, I do work for a political action group, and the Congress people are just they're not responding. Um, the
We
Republic
need new folks.
the
Well,
Republicans they're just not picking up their phones. They're
mm,
just like we have power, we don't have to. That's the way they're thinking now. We
yep.
don't have to respond. It's scary. They won't even show up to town halls.
I
You
know
know,
it's a different era. I mean the era of where somebody can get elected and just and two, they pick their voters. I mean they've gerrymandered things so efficiently that they're not worried about getting elected and reelected in a lot of these districts. So
Hmm.
it's a lot. But Antonio, man, I'm glad we were able to connect. I enjoy this, and we're gonna have to
I
keep
do
doing
too.
it because there's gonna be
100% agree.
going to be a ton of additional historical things I think that we're going to need to talk about. I would just say, to people, hopefully you enjoyed this.
I did.
Give my man, find him 10 Minute History, find his
Hmm.
newsletter, follow him. You better follow me, and and we're out here fighting a good fight, and it takes resources. And one of the things I noticed that's happening on Substack is, we're getting a lot of celebrities on here now, and they're sucking the air out of the room, so to speak. But cats like us have been trying to do this for a while, and I really do not want to see this platform turn into legacy media central. For all the outcasts of legacy media. So if you're able, become a paid subscriber, and help support us. And I enjoyed it, man. We're
I
gonna
did
do it
too.
again soon.
Thank you so much for having me on, Marlon. Thank you for reaching out. You're doing an amazing job. Keep it up, and we'll definitely do this again. I really enjoyed myself.
Absolutely. All right,
You have a
folks. If
good
you've
day.
got some questions, you know how to reach both of us. My DMs are open. Please, be easy with the criticism, and I'll see you on the other side.
Take care.
All right.